Before we get started, of course, I want to introduce my guys, let them tell you how they've been doing. Let's get started. Brent, man, what's going on with you, man? How you doing today?
All is well. That's our thing for the year. All is well. I'm gonna keep on saying that.
Okay.
No matter what's going on, all is well.
Things could be worse, man. So all is well. It's great, man. It's good to be on this side. So, Meldrick, man, what's going on with you, man? How you doing today?
Same. All is well on my way. Everything is good. Everything is great. Ready to get this started so we can get some good information.
And without further ado, we want to introduce our guest, Antjuan Seawright. So, Antjuan, how are you doing today, man? What's going on with you?
Blessed by the best. It's so good to be with you all for the first time. I hope that I'm here for a good time and a long time. Certainly want to give you all kudos for the work that you all are doing. I think it's so important to have critical voices and critical spaces that can relate to our experience, both the African seed and the American son and daughter. But more broadly speaking, when I think about how consequential Black men are, both their voices, our votes, our issues, and collectively our lives, it's so good to be one of the four corners of the square.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Man, like y'all said, man, I'm just glad to be here. Thankful to be with you guys here. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I just want to introduce Antjuan to you guys, kind of let you know his background before we start talking and asking him questions. So just real quick, Antjuan is a CBS News political contributor. He's also an opinion writer for The Hill, BuzzFeed News, and the Christian Recorder. He's also the founder and CEO of Blueprint Strategy LLC, a public relations, advertising, and political consulting firm based in South Carolina. He has led many extensive grassroots and strategic efforts for political clients at the national, state, and local level. He has advised campaigns for governors, U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, state legislature, and other down ballot races. He has advised the 2008 and 2016 presidential campaign for Hillary Clinton. He has also advised as the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, South Carolina Democratic Party, the Georgia State Democratic Party, the New York State Democratic Party, and the South Carolina State Senate Democratic Caucus. And
Hey,
potentially our
Antoine.
vote. But yeah, he continues to serve as a senior advisor to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the Democratic National Committee. He is also a senior visiting fellow at Third Way. So, like I said, without further ado, we are introducing. We got our guy Antjuan here. So, man, let's give him a round of applause. So let's get into it, y'all. Brendan, if you want to go ahead and start with your questions, let's go
Okay.
there, and then we'll kind of go around.
Well, Antoine, you know how we do it in the Black church. The senior pastor got to read out the guest pastor's biography. I don't know why it is, but anytime when the guest pastor, he always be sitting there like.
I was about to say, sitting there like this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is he praying? What is he doing?
Right. Anytime that against past at our church, I always glance over when Bishop read they biography, they just be in deep thought. I'm going like, okay, that must be
Spiritual humble warrior. That's what that's called. Spiritual humble warrior.
Right.
Oh.
But yeah, man, thank you first off for being with us. I mean, when you messaged me saying you wanted to talk about the Black Belt vote, I thought you wanted us to come just have a conversation. You said, no, I want to be on the podcast. I said, okay. We're going to make this happen. And we appreciate you being here. And the biggest thing in the news is today with the debate that happened a few days ago. Yeah, we can admit Biden didn't do that well. He was under the weather. But we cannot negate that Trump they said over 30 lies, like a lie almost every minute while he was up there. So do debates have that big of an advantage on voters and voting? And should we be fearful from this debate, regardless of all the things that this administration has accomplished thus far? Should we negate all of that for a bad night?
Well, the reason I wanted to show up in this space is because the way we inhale and exhale information in 2024 is not the same as we did in 2004, in 2008, 2012, and 16. a lot of us get information from spaces like this. So I thought it was so important for me to show up here, because we all know that misinformation, disinformation, where I'm from, we call it lies, makes its way to the podcast world,
Right.
makes its way to radio hosts on air every morning that people listen to for other news, and then certain themselves in the political conversation. So I want to show up here to make sure we are dealing with facts and not feelings. And when it comes to facts, going to the debate the other night, most reasonable people would agree that from a cosmetic standpoint, meaning how it looked, Joe Biden did not have his best night. We all agree with that. Even the president himself agree with that. But when you overall measure his overall performance, whether that's the money raised, the $33 million raised, whether it's the polling that CNN polling did not see any change. There were some polls indicated that independent folks broke towards President Biden. Or if you look at the fact that Donald Trump stood on the debate stage for 90 minutes and lied without flinching. So how do you measure debate performance? It's subjective versus objective. Do we have work to do? Yes. Should people be able to express their frustrations, anger, confusion, pissivity, however you want to describe it? Yes. But one night has never defined an election. A debate in June, which we've never had before, or any debate for that matter, has never been able to totally define an election. If that were the case, Ronald Reagan would have never been president.
Oh,
Obama would have never won re-election, and Donald Trump would have never been president because Hillary Clinton cooked his books in that debate in 2016. So I think it's all in perspective. If you get off K Street and travel to my street where elections are won, and I said at my street, our street collective, you know that most people who paid attention know that was not the best version of Joe Biden. But they also know the threats that come along with Donald Trump and Trumpism that existed before that debate still exist after that debate. Whether it's threats to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, whether it's threat to taking away basic fundamental freedoms as we know it, those that we've been recently able to unlock and enjoy as Black folks, whether it's extremism to the ultimate measures, whether it's more exposure and the amplification of white nationalism, Christian white nationalism, bigotry and hate, white supremacists, all those things that come along with Donald Trump and Trumpism, those things did not go away because Joe Biden had a bad night. And if you are a true loyal to the cause person, forget about Democrat, but loyal to the cause. And if you're Black, loyal to our community, you will know that this election is bigger than Joe Biden. We will have the opportunity, fellas, to put a Black man by the name of Hakeem Jeffries in the speaker's chair if we turn out to vote. A Black man by the name of Joe Neguse, assistant speaker of the House of Representatives, if we turn out to vote. A woman from Massachusetts by the name of Catherine Clark, for the first time, majority leader in the United States Congress, if we turn out to vote. A Latino from California, Pete Aguilar, majority whip, first time, if we turn out to vote. A Ted Lieu, California, member of the Asian American Pacific Islander community, will be our caucus leader if we turn out to vote. 2 Black women in the United States Senate, if we turn out to vote. The historical nature, if we turn out to vote and ignore the noise and focus on the lyrics, hangs in the balance. That's why this election is bigger than Joe Biden. And we cannot forget the most consequential vice president to ever serve these United States, the first African American, the first Asian American, the first woman of color, Kamala Harris, is on that ballot as well.
Okay. And part B of my question, and you just winged on into it, because if you ask me, I'm a beehive, not a beehive. No, that's Beyonce. I'm a K-hive. I'm a K-hive. So as a Black American, as a Black man, how do you feel seeing, they putting out this narrative, and I've always said they put out this narrative because of the woman that's supporting Joe Biden. How do you feel all these white Democrats coming out saying we need to replace Joe with Gavin Newsom, with Governor Whitmore from Michigan, or they bringing up all these white governors and things like that, and they totally overlook the Black woman who, I like how Dr. Carr says, is a heartbeat away from the presidency. How do you feel as a Black man, as a Black American, seeing her being overlooked, where she has been the most, hey, she's broken the ties when it comes down to the votes in the Senate. And a lot of the bills that have been passed by this administration, she has been in the blueprint of those bills, whether she did it in California or she did it while she was running for president. She put forth those efforts as bills herself. How does that make you feel?
Well, regardless of where the traffic comes from, it pisses me off to know that in 2024, the Black woman is still viewed as she was in some places in 1964 and in 1904. Let's start there. Mm-hmm. Secondarily, there would not be no Joe Biden. There would not be any of those historical accomplishments if it wasn't for Black voters showing up in record handsome form in 2020 to save democracy, as we always do. And as a result of participation, and as a result of us demonstrating our trust at the ballot box, we were able to deliver a Black woman for the first time as the highest ranking Black woman in the world, being the Vice President of the United States. And so when I hear people not only skip over, but when I hear people downplay the role that the Vice President plays, Kamala Harris that is, it reminds me how much work we have to do. Just because we're there doesn't mean everyone appreciates us being there. And so it is incumbent upon us to uplift and amplify her and her work every single chance we get. You have a Black woman who is an HBCU graduate, member of the Lynx, Alpha Kappa Alpha member, a wife, a mother, an aunt, a surrogate aunt for a lot of people. I mean, again, I would argue the most consequential, or if not one of the most consequential vice presidents of the United States. And forget about the fact that she's broken the tie in terms of legislatively. Think about what she's been able to bring to the table in terms of complimenting President Biden, in terms of driving her life experiences into the narrative. And think about what she's been able to help marshal through the United States Congress, whether it's her being at the table, making sure that during the pandemic, we put shots in arms, we put kids back in school. $100 billion went to rescue small Black and brown businesses. We had to make sure that internet was available for kids who were doing e-learning. We had to make sure $40 billion went towards saving people from their homes, make sure that veterans had their fair share. $16 billion went to historical Black colleges and universities, including paying off their capital debt. We passed the largest infrastructure bill since, I think, Dwight Eisenhower, where we fixed roads, bridges, airports. But thanks to Jim Clyburn and Kamala Harris, we were able to make sure that every household in this country had access to the internet, replacing lead pipes to the tune of $80 billion. That means communities that look like ours were drinking lead water, lead pipes. That no longer exists. We make sure that veterans who were exposed to Agent Orange got their fair share by way of the PACT Act. For the first time in our nation's history, we passed, for the first time in 30 years, the first piece of major gun legislation. As a result, we've seen violent crime go down in this country. Mm-hmm. Not to mention the most diverse administration in our nation's history, more Black people working in this White House or in this administration than ever before. The CHIPS and Science Act forced us to start making things at home again, which means bringing jobs back home. We saved the pension of the union workers. Then we did the Inflation Reduction Act. Which means we lowered the price of insulin at $35 a month for seniors starting in January of 2025. The price of insulin was capped. The price of your prescription drugs, $2,000 a year, the largest investment in climate change in the history of the world. And what they could not accomplish, Biden and Harris together, legislative-wise, they did it by executive order, including most of the elements that existed in the George Floyd Policing Act, many of the things that came with the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. We saw 5 million people, $165 billion in student loan debt wiped out. Make certain that when it came to child care in this country, We put a cap on that for those who qualify. I mean, there's so many things that happen under her watch and under the watch of this president. That is a direct result of our participation as Black folks and our advocacy. That's why we can't let a 90-minute debate determine how we show up in November, because all those things go away if we don't keep showing up.
Sound like that system been busy. Go ahead, Braxton Melcher.
I have a question. So, what would you tell someone who is not a huge person about politics? Like, how would you, I don't want to say persuade, but I guess you could say persuade. How would you persuade them to, learn about voting and getting into learning about what's going on with voting and in politics? Like, how would you, I guess persuade them or encourage them to learn about that stuff? That's my first question.
Well, I would first ask them, what do you care about? And no matter what they say to me, I am going to make sure I redline it directly back to politics. Because I was always taught, even if you don't do politics, politics will do you. Whether it's your little kid's baseball game, whether it's the food you eat, the gas you put in your car, the internet you may look at social media on, all those things are somehow tied back to an elected official and social political engagement in some way, shape, or form. So I would start with making it relatable to what's important to them. Secondarily, I would ask them, are you happy with everything about what you see going on around you? And most people, reasonable people, will say, hell no. And so the answer is hell no. It's like, which way you go? And from that, we start a conversation about how they can incrementally get involved. Because you don't give a person a whole hog on the plate and expect them to eat it. You don't do that with anything. You have to make sure that you piecemeal it, give it to them bit by bit, find out what things that they are tuned into or locked into or enjoy, and then continue to build out from there. Because as humans, we run away from what we don't know about. We fear what we don't know. And so when we fear, the first thing we do naturally is to retreat. And I think we have to keep that in mind as we try to make certain that people are engaged. And then finally, I would say to them, we're not asking you to take a bullet. We're not asking you to bleed. We're not asking you to take the sacrifices of dogs being sick on you. We're just asking you to express yourself at the ballot box when the election comes. That's all we're asking.
Okay. Well, that's good. Like I said, because I know there's a lot of people who are not big into politics. I was one of them, a few years back. But as I've gotten older, I kind of, like you said, I kind of recognize the things that go around on what goes on in the community, and of course, because the community where you live, is what's going to affect you the most. Of course, the presidential election is important, but your elections that's in your city and your state is probably even more important, in my opinion. I think
well, look, I always tell people the closer your government is to you, the more important it is for you. When your trash is not being picked up, you don't call the White House. You have to call your city or your county commission, depending on where you live. If little Antjuan's in trouble, I don't call my member of Congress. I have to call my school board member. If I'm raising hell about state teachers' pay, you don't call your United States Senator. You call your local legislator. And so there are things that people at the local level are more connected to than those at the federal level. And there are many things that happen at the federal level are only implemented at the local level. And so many times in Republican-led states all across the country, the money will trickle down, but they don't find its way to our community because there's a clog in the wheel somewhere at the state level or at the local level. That's why representation matters. That's why voting in every single election matters. And if that's not enough, we've seen George Floyd. We've seen some of these accidents not even accidents, these cases that have been happening on camera, live and in color, where people videotape them. If we don't elect local prosecutors to deal with them in a real way, then we can't get justice served as we know it.
Right. As my other question was, for people who, like I said, people who are not real familiar with politics and stuff like that, for someone who is trying to learn, about, elected officials and stuff like that, is there a way that they can search and find what each candidate is, what they're about, where they're from, what their mission is, what their goals are? Is there a way that people can find that information? Is there like I don't know if a blog or if there's like some type of summary about that person, or like is there a way that they can find that information, and how can they do that?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to know who your current elected officials are and what they actually can do for you, because a lot of people are confused about who can do what. And so I think that's number one. And number two, you find out from there when these elections are held, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, the length of the term. Thirdly, you get that information from the local websites. So, for instance, if you're in South Carolina, it's scvotes.gov. No matter your state, if you're looking for the state level, you go to whatever.gov. Look for credible sources to get this information, not these blogs that take you in the middle of nowhere and so forth, because that's the danger. And that's where the misinformation, disinformation, and lies come into place. Credible sources, trusted sources, where you go and find out who your officials are. And once you find out who your officials are, you can then find out when they're up for re-election or election and who's running against them in their platform. And the reason why that's important is because we have to learn in our community to hold elected officials accountable. It doesn't matter if they look like us. It doesn't matter if they go to church with us. If they're not doing their job, it's up to us to speak up and speak out about that.
Braxton, what you got?
Yeah, no, those are all really good questions. And I would say the question for me, Antjuan, is there are a lot of crises and just kind of issues going on around the world. Right now, you got the war between Russia, Ukraine. You also have Israel and Hamas, the border crisis, those types of things. How, as Black and brown people, when we see them giving a lot of money, to these other countries, to fight these wars and these other things that are happening. How do we look at that, and I guess, how should we look at that as voters? Does that benefit us in any way, or 'cause I know there's people, people that talk down to it. They're giving billions of dollars to these things that are happening around the world, but what about what's happening here in America? So just what's the right way, I guess, the right lens, I guess, to look at, what's going on around the world and how it affects us in our communities.
Well, what's going on around the world has tremendous impact on us. If we allow Putin to succeed with his power grab exercise in Ukraine, it's going to further allow him to leverage to take over other countries, which will ultimately mean his ultimate goal is to take over the West, take over the West. Same thing with China. And so when it comes to interfering with elections, when it comes to all these things, it's all tied to how well we defend in Ukraine. Ukraine is an ally. We have to stand up for our allies. That's just who we are as Americans, because if Ukraine fall, then perhaps that is a segue for Putin to do whatever he wants. And that has tremendous impact on the rest of the world. Forget about the United States. So a lot of this does not meet the naked eye, or is not digestible on the surface, because foreign policy is a very complicated thing unless you do foreign policy. But you just have to know that in most cases, I say most, because most people agree that Donald Trump was the exception, the leader of the free world is always fighting with America's long and short-term interests at heart. You can't question that about Joe Biden. Now, people may, of course, we have challenges at home. We're always going to have challenges at home. Of course, we have challenges abroad. We're always going to have challenges abroad. But there's some challenges that force us to rise to a certain level quicker and sooner and more aggressive than others. And that's how I view the conflict in Ukraine.
Wow.
Thanks. Thanks. Good answer. Good answer. And I have one more question. So I do want to kind of know, how did you get your start? Who was it that like influenced you? What was it that, I guess, drove you to get into politics, and what kind of got that fire, going for you?
Well, I like to say it was my fifth grade experience. When I was in fifth grade, I ran for vice president of my student council. Wasn't expected to win, but I won. And I think that was the birth of my whatever version of a political start. But throughout my life, I believe that God orders our steps. And he does things that does not make sense on the surface or put us in places and spaces that we don't see while we're in it. But when we look back in retrospect, we see why it makes sense. I was always like class leader, line leader, from the time I was a child until fifth grade, and all these basketball team captain, and you name it. I've always played some sort of leadership role where I've had to manage people, manage personalities, galvanize people, galvanize personalities for a common goal to go forward. And so I believe that my steps have just been ordered for me to be in the space that I am. And if I wasn't supposed to be doing what I'm doing, I'm convinced God would not have me. And I don't insert my spiritual beliefs heavily on anybody, but I'm a believer that God does all things well. And that includes putting me in spaces even like this for such a time as this. Because you guys could have had anybody else in the world on this podcast, but it lined up for us to be here in a time in which the world is spinning with uncertainty, whether it's around the debate, whether it's around the conflict in Ukraine, whether it's what's happening in Gaza, whether it's about the president, the vice president. There's a specific reason that we're here, and I'm convinced that was ordered and preordained.
Sounds like you said you were class president, or not class president, but you said you ran for vice president. Well,
we the council, and I won.
Okay. Oh, we have somebody on this podcast that's won many things as well.
Yeah.
You know, in ninth grade he was the Dutch. 11th grade, 10th grade he was something else, and I forgot. Junior year he was the prince.
I think he was the president of the Black Students Association.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was.
And prom king,
homecoming king,
king, and all.
Yeah.
Antjuan, I'm talking about.
We renamed him Eddie Kane Jr.
Anytime we see him, there's, I don't know, for some reason there's horns playing in the background. It's just dun 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 dun. I don't know. They just come out of nowhere, and they just introduce this guy right there. So, he wins everything he did.
We're talking about some old stuff, man. That's years ago.
We guess God is good.
Yeah.
And all the time.
God is good.
There you go.
There he is. Yeah.
And we can answer. Candace Owen couldn't answer that, but we gotta know that by heart.
All kinfolk and kinfolk.
That's right.
Right. No, that's good to hear, Antjuan. So it's awesome that you mentioned that. So there's been leadership just kind of throughout your life, and you showed just kind of how it's led you up to the point that you are right now.
Look, we hadn't talked about the black men. Like, we all black brothers here. We talk about black men.
Yeah.
Man, I ain't through.
Okay.
Go ahead. All right. So since you brought that up about black men, how can I go with this? What is it about the Republican Party that they feel that they can get a substantial amount of the black male support? Why did Steve Bannon feel like he could come out and say, we're going to get 50% of the black male vote? Why does Donald Trump say things like my mug shot or some doggone gold sneakers that these folks may not even get? How is it that he can say stuff like that and think it's going to placate to black men or just black people, period? And why is it that why does it, in your opinion, do you feel it's so hard for the Democratic Party to reach out or have that niche work to black men like they do with black women, even though we're the second to black women that vote for the Democratic Party?
Well, a couple of things. There are extremists on the other side who are white men who think that they can speak in 2024 as it relates to black people as if it's 1944. I think we see that when we hear the former president, convicted felon, try to tie his mugshot to the plight of Black men and our struggles with the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
Period. What Republicans feel as if they feel like there's blood in the water. They feel a vulnerable group of people that for years they've carved the system to intentionally not work for us. And they know that. And so they want to feel like they can hoodwink us or dangle some nugget that they are somehow the answer to the problem they created for us. Full stop. I think what they underestimate is the intensity by which Black men have always showed up. Every major movement, social movement in this country has been fueled by young people, Black men and Black women being on the front line, and the Black church and the Black press. That's where you guys come into play. And so this moment we're in is no different. And so when it comes to Black men, I don't mind saying on this podcast or anywhere in the world, Black men are the most consequential voting bloc in a generation and will be the most decisive voting bloc in any election we live through going forward. I appreciate the tenacity and the intensity by which Black women have stepped up to save democracy. But there's a strategy going on the other side called divide and conquer. Because when we win elections, it's the collective Black vote that gets us across the finish line first. So if Republicans and extremists and divisionary folks understand, if they can implement the old divide and conquer strategy, meaning they can split us up and try to pit us against each other, we're going to lose. If we have 100% participation among Black women and not the same intensity or percentage among Black men, or not enough, we're going to lose. Mm-hmm. When 13% of Black men voted for Donald Trump in 2016, we lost. Mm-hmm. And so there's proof in the pudding with that. And so what you see is us being targeted with misinformation, disinformation. Again, where I'm from, we call it lies. The biggest lie I hear as I'm going across the country doing barbershop conversations is Donald Trump gave us checks. Well, when I mentioned the American Rescue Plan that Kamala Harris helped oversaw, the Black woman, what I forgot to mention was we cut Black child poverty in half by 50%.
Yes, sir.
$300 up to $300 per child per household. In some cases, households were getting somewhere north of $1,500 to up to $2,500, $3,500 a month. That didn't come from Donald Trump. But Republicans say it enough and they repeat it enough, followed by some of the online traffic from foreign actors, bad foreign actors, to people actually start to believe that, educated brothers who start to believe that. The boys at the space table start to believe that. The boys at the hole in the wall start to believe that. And so that's why programs like this or this podcast is so important, because we've got to put real information out and let people decide. Not what Charlemagne says on The Breakfast Club, not what Stephen A. Smith says on his podcast. No disrespect to those brothers, but we're fighting a real generational battle here that we cannot afford to lose as Black men and as Black people.
Okay, I'm going to play, I hate saying this word, the devil's advocate. I'm going to sound like one of them. I want you to talk to me like I'm one of them brothers, or how I get attacked when I'm on social media and I come back with the truth. Nah, man, forget all that bull junk. We've been giving the Democrats our vote for 60 years and they ain't did nothing for us. They ain't did nothing particularly for us as a Black man. I mean, we ain't got reparations. We ain't got none of that kind of stuff. So how you gonna tell me to vote for Jim Crow Joe, who started the 94 crime bill, and then he ain't did nothing for me today? Well, what are you gonna do for me today, Antjuan?
Well, I would
Democratic Shield.
I would start
what
with,
they say.
I would start with, how often have you been participating in the process, and what does your participation look like? The second thing I would ask my brothers at the space table, at the barbershop, is, do you know who your elected officials are? And do they know you? Because if you feel like your life hadn't changed, then you've got to find somebody to go make your life ask to. The third thing I would say to them brothers, we've seen when the other side have had their opportunity to be in charge, they stripped away your right to vote. They tried to limit what your healthcare looks like.
Mm-hmm.
They've called for the execution of men who look like you wrongfully and did not apologize. They tried to say your mother, your aunt, grandmother, and sister should not be able to make her own healthcare decisions. They tried to say the first Black man president who looks like you was not a citizen of this country. They tried to say that you don't need clean drinking water in your community. They had, during the pandemic, when most people was hurting, couldn't get jobs, it was them who advocated for cutting off the extra $200 to your unemployment insurance check. It was them in most states around the country who said that kids don't need meals during the summer, even though a lot of kids go hungry during the summer. So you got to ask yourself, what are they going to do for you, and what have they done for you compared to the ones who say they're doing for you and the ones that are making a real effort to do for you? It wasn't us who called a Black woman a dog. It was Donald Trump and his party. It wasn't us who used the word colored from the House floor. It was Donald Trump and his party. And the list goes on and on and on, depending on where you live. So the thing you have to ask yourself is, are you okay with that type of living? And if you are, then by all means, then you go vote for them. But if you're not, at least be open to learning about people who are trying to do some good for you, your family, and your community.
Gotcha. And I got one more question concern. You was at 100 Black Men of America in Atlanta.
I spoke there.
You was on a panel and you spoke there.
I spoke there for the second year in a row, matter of fact.
Okay. Well, tell me this. With that being nothing but Black men, what was the energy in the room when they saw or heard Vice President Kamala Harris, who, when I'm on these social media platforms, they all try to put out, she ain't Black enough. She locked up 1,500 Black men when she was the AG of California, and I have debunked that millions and millions of times. And she's those are the kind of the top things right there. She ain't Black. She hadn't done anything for us. She locked up Black men. Oh, and she said she wasn't going to do anything. Took a 5-second clip and said, I'm not going to do anything particularly for Black people. But then I come back with the full segment and show what she said before and after, talking about unconstitutional law and all that kind of stuff. So how was that energy, or what was the response from literally Black men in Atlanta when you were there?
Well, it was electric, because the vice president, as I said, has been consequential. And she's done a lot to make certain that Black men are inclusive. And the people around her and the policies she's advocated for. She's led this trip to the 100 Black Men Conference was part of a larger footprint of her doing a Black economic tour centered around Black men and Black wealth. And so the room responded accordingly. No matter what people say in the media or what some say on social media, at the end of the day, most people are proud that we have, if you're Black, that we have someone who looks like our mother, our sister, our aunt, grandmother, and so forth. Because a lot of people never thought it was reachable. In the same way that nobody thought it was reachable for a Black man to be the leader of the free world. And so you don't have to agree with a person 100% in order to appreciate and value the fact that they represent your shared values. And I think that's what you know. And she just didn't take the stage by herself. She took the stage with Steve Harvey, a respected Black man, whether you watch him, listen to him or not, respected. And so I think Kamala Harris is doing well. Overall, I think the conference energy was great. But the most important thing, as I said at the conference when I spoke, the most important things are not what happens at the conference, but it's almost like church, what happens when we leave here. And that's the work that we have to do with 100 Black men, 100 Black women, sororities, fraternities, the Masons, the church, you name it. We have to be all collectively one band, one sound. So I'm helping lead this 16 plus city tour with the 100 Black men all across the country, doing direct engagements all across the country in cities and states with Black men to help them shape what their understanding is about the issues and the stakes of this election, and not coming to preach to them or to teach them, but more importantly, hearing from them so we can help shape a policy agenda that speaks directly to the needs, fears, concerns, hopes, and aspirations of Black men.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
That's good. That's good. Thanks, Antjuan. Thank you. And so I think I had one more question that I was going to ask you. And so it's along the lines, and you really kind of mentioned it and talked about it already, but you may just want to drive this home, kind of at the end. And I want to ask a question around, white fear, right? And then I guess how it leads to a lot of these new laws and things, voting rights laws being implemented, and how it affects the Black vote. And you can break it down, into how it affects the Black men, right? Like our vote as well. But just how does that fear, right, of Black and brown people voting affect, just what's going on, and why all these seems like all these voting rights laws are against, people of color, getting to the polls, right? So just if you want to break it down, like why, like why that happens, and then why our vote is so important.
Well, let me say this. The vote is the most powerful thing we have in a democratic society. And democracy is a gift and not a guarantee. So elections give us the chance to keep expressing ourselves at the ballot box, expressing our fears, expressing our hopes, our dreams, our aspirations, but also demonstrating our trust. Every time Black people have showed up in record numbers or in majority numbers from our community, we've shifted the conversation, we've shifted the policy dynamics, we've shifted the overall tectonic plates in this country. That's why every time we've showed up, you've seen people try to course correct laws to keep us from showing up. We show up in record numbers in 2020. In Georgia, they make it criminal to give someone food and water in line. In Texas, they moved drop box locations and they closed early voting sites. In some places, they purged the rolls. In Florida, they give you a modern day poll tax. You serve your time, you got to pay a restitution fine to re-register to vote. In some cases, if your signature does not line up, they don't allow you to vote. In South Carolina, they move your precinct without giving you proper notification. So you show up to vote in one place you're used to voting at, and they moved it and didn't tell you. So these things, these barriers to entry, if you will, have always existed over time, because when we show up, things happen in our favor, and no one expects the system to work in our favor. That's why we have to keep expressing ourselves at the ballot box. That's why we've got to treat voting the same way we treat exercise. You can't just do it one time and think your problems are going to go away. You can't get one haircut, no disrespect to B, and think that all your problems are going to go away. You can't, for ladies, you can't just go to the nail salon once and think your nail issues are going to go away. We've got to keep doing it over and over and over again, because eventually things will change. And if you don't believe me, think about this. Republicans for 58 years have tried to rearrange the courts to make it so that women cannot make their own healthcare decisions. It didn't happen in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, but now Roe v. Wade was overturned. And we've seen the other cases starting to flow that way. Think about for us, since the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was signed into law, they've been doing everything they can to try to roll that back. And didn't take 10 years, 15 years, but bit by bit, they rolled back many of the things that's in the Voting Rights Act of the 1960s. And here we are today, old battles have become new. And so we can't act as if progress is permanent in our community. And that's where we made a mistake over time.
Hey, that was good, Antjuan. That was real good. So I don't know if you guys have any more questions. I think we're good. Antjuan, if you want to give us your social media, how we can follow you, how we can find you.
Well, my social media is Antjuan, ANTJUANSEA. That's my last name. And if you can't find me there, just call up Jesus. I tend to follow him a lot.
Okay.
That's pretty good right
We
there.
appreciate that. That's fine, man. We appreciate having you on. We appreciate it, man.
Do it
Thank,
again, Kristen.
A
thank you.
lot of good information, man. A lot of good information.
And
Like I
next
said, that was
time
just
we have you on, I want to get to more specifics of the importance of the Black church in this time.
Oh, I can't wait to do that. I just did a big ministers meeting in Georgia on Wednesday last week, 150 preachers from across Atlanta. And I had to remind them that every major social movement in this country has included the Black church.
Come on.
Yeah.
And while they have been hoodwinked and fooled by white folks that the church can't play certain roles, Christian white nationalists are organizing at the church level in order to shift and frame this election. So we better wake up.
Yes, yes. So save the rest of this next time we have you on.